The courthouse was nearly empty. The sun had long set behind the tall Atlanta skyline, casting a golden haze that had now faded into dusky shadows. Inside the grand halls of justice, the echo of footsteps had gone silent. No more lawyers pacing, no more gavel strikes. Just a quiet stillness and one lone figure. Malik Williams moved through the marble-floored corridors, pushing a worn-out yellow mop bucket. Dressed in a faded blue uniform that read maintenance. He looked like any other janitor, just a kid doing a night shift. But Malik was far from ordinary. At just 19 years old, he knew more about the law than many fresh-faced interns working in the offices above him. His hands were calloused from work, but his mind was razor-sharp, filled with statutes, case law, constitutional codes, and trial strategy. While most saw a janitor, Malik saw himself as something else. A student, a strategist, a silent observer of injustice. Every evening, after seeing his mother off to her overnight job at the hospital, Malik arrived at the courthouse. He cleaned, scrubbed, swept, and vacuumed. But he also watched. Through cracked doors, from behind benches, and inside empty courtrooms, he soaked in everything like a sponge. He had no official mentor. No legal mentor took him under their wing. But he didn't need one. His mentors were the loud attorneys battling it out in open court. His professors were the judges whose rulings he memorized. His textbooks were discarded law books he collected and read by flashlight when the hall lights dimmed. Nobody noticed the janitor who watched. And that's exactly how he liked it. Malik's fascination with the law didn't start in a lecture hall. It started in a much darker place, a police precinct. He was just 10 years old when his father was arrested outside their apartment complex. The charge? Shoplifting. A bottle of cough syrup from a pharmacy. Malik remembered his father coughing badly for days, but they couldn't afford medicine. The police didn't care about that. His father insisted he didn't steal, that it was a mistake. But no one believed him. There was no public defender available that week, so he was given a rushed, uninterested court-appointed attorney who barely looked at the file. The trial lasted 7 minutes. The judge, white and stern, gave him 3 months in county jail. That was the day Malik saw the legal system not as a shield, but as a sword, one pointed at people like him. From that moment on, Malik began watching the world with different eyes. By 12, he was reading secondhand law books. By 14, he was correcting news anchors' legal commentary. By 16, he finished high school 2 years early. But college wasn't simple. With no money and no connections, he applied for an online program at Howard University School of Law and earned a partial scholarship. He studied at night while working full-time as a janitor. And nobody knew. Even when he passed the Georgia bar exam on his first attempt, a feat rarely accomplished by anyone under 25, he kept it a secret. Why? Because he knew credentials meant little when you looked like the help. In the eyes of the system, he was still the janitor. Still the poor black kid from the east side of Atlanta. But he didn't mind being underestimated. In fact, he counted on it. Every mop stroke was practice in patience. Every ignored greeting hardened his resolve. Every overheard racist joke, every closed elevator door, every patronizing glance from the lawyers whose offices he cleaned. It all fueled him. He knew his time would come. The day when he would no longer be invisible. As Malik moved through Courtroom 3 that night, he paused at the bench. He wiped it down slowly, reverently. It was here that he had spent the most time. Listening from the shadows as lawyers argued and judges ruled. He imagined standing behind that table one day, papers in hand, speaking with authority. But dreams weren't enough. Reality was sitting heavy at home. His mother, Tanya, had just received an eviction notice. Their landlord, Mr. Kessler, a wealthy real estate owner with a record of displacing tenants in black communities, had claimed they violated their lease. It was a lie. Malik knew it. They paid on time, followed every rule, kept the apartment spotless. But Malik also knew the game. Kessler wanted them out because a tech company was offering nearly triple rent for their unit. It wasn't personal. It was business. Ruthless, racially motivated business. Tanya had cried when she read the notice. "We got 30 days, Malik. Where we gonna go?" Malik hadn't answered. He just hugged her, then quietly stepped outside, sat on the apartment steps, and stared up at the stars. That night, he made a decision. He wouldn't let this slide. Not this time. Kessler had a reputation. Malik had heard whispers during late-night courtroom cleanings. Rumors of past shady evictions, of tenants silenced with threats and forced to leave without legal recourse. Malik had even found archived court filings, most dismissed due to lack of representation. But now, Malik wasn't just a kid with a mop. He was a licensed attorney. He could file the paperwork. He could represent his own mother. He could expose the pattern, drag Kessler into court, and let the truth speak louder than the stereotypes. But he also knew, if he walked into court wearing a crisp suit, nobody would believe he earned it. They'd think he was pretending. But if he walked in wearing the uniform they expected, the uniform they ignored, he could flip the script. He could shatter their assumptions. As he finished mopping the courtroom, Malik walked to the back wall where an old mirror hung crooked on a nail. He looked at himself. Mop in hand, uniform wrinkled, eyes tired. But behind that reflection stood something else. A fighter. A lawyer. A storm they never saw coming. The letter came in a plain white envelope. No logo. No polite language. Just a single bold word across the top. Notice. Tanya Williams stood in the narrow kitchen, her fingers trembling as she reread the words. The eviction was official. She and her son had 30 days to vacate the only home they'd known for the past 17 years. Malik found her staring at the paper, still in her hospital scrubs, a cold cup of tea untouched beside her. "Ma," he said gently, taking the paper from her hands. "What's this?" Tanya's voice cracked. "It's from Kessler's office. He said we violated the lease, that we've been late too many times. But Malik, I pay on time. Every month. You know I do." "I know," Malik replied, his jaw tightening. "Let me see this." He scanned the document quickly. The wording was clever, vague enough to be legal, aggressive enough to intimidate. He flipped it over, searching for dates, signatures, anything that could be challenged. His eyes landed on one small sentence tucked between paragraphs. "Tenant has breached the terms of the agreement through persistent failure to maintain sanitary conditions and consistent non-payment of rent." A lie, a fabricated excuse. Their apartment was spotless. Tanya scrubbed every surface twice a week, even after 12-hour night shifts. And their rent? Malik handed her the cash personally every month. Money he earned cleaning the very courthouse that would now decide their fate. "I'm calling him," Tanya muttered suddenly, reaching for her phone. "I'm not letting him just do this." "Wait." Malik placed a firm hand over hers. "That's exactly what he wants. For you to call angry, desperate. Give him a reason to say you threatened him or acted erratic. Then he files a restraining order, and we're out even sooner." Tanya looked at her son. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't yelling. His expression was calm, focused, calculating. "But what can we do, baby? We don't have money for a lawyer." Malik didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked to the cabinet, pulled down an old folder labeled receipts, and began sorting through it. Months of handwritten receipts, payment confirmations, and bank withdrawal slips lay in careful stacks. Tanya watched in confusion. "Malik, I'm going to take care of it." Her brow furrowed. "How?" "By talking to someone at the building office." He shook his head. "No, Ma. I'm going to file a lawsuit." Tanya stared. "A lawsuit?" "Yes, for unlawful eviction, for discrimination, for harassment." She blinked. "But with what lawyer?" He paused, then looked up at her. "Me." The room went still. Tanya laughed softly, thinking he was joking. But then she saw the look in his eyes. Not playful, not naive. Steady. Serious. "What do you mean, you?" she asked slowly. Malik stood, opened a drawer under his bed, and pulled out a slim black folder. Inside was a laminated ID, Georgia Bar Association, attorney Malik J. Williams. Tanya gasped, covering her mouth. Malik, what is this? When did this happen? I passed the bar 6 months ago, he said, almost apologetically. I studied online at night, took the exam in secret. I didn't want to tell you until I was ready. Tears welled in her eyes. You're a lawyer? My son is a lawyer. He smiled. Yes, Ma. And now I'm your lawyer. Tanya sat down slowly, as if her legs had given out. But how? How did you manage school and work and… all of it? Malik shrugged. You taught me how to do hard things. You did it your whole life. I just followed your lead. The silence between them was heavy, but not from fear anymore, from awe. Tanya looked at her son as if seeing him for the first time. But Malik, she said, even if you're a lawyer, we don't have a chance. Kessler has money, power. He'll hire someone big. He always wins. Malik's smile faded, replaced by quiet resolve. That's what he's counting on, that we'll give up before we even try. But this time, someone's going to stand up to him. And it's going to be me. He turned back to the folder and began organizing papers, collecting rental agreements, photographs of the apartment, text messages with the landlord, emails, maintenance requests that had gone ignored. Tanya sat beside him and joined in, her tears drying as she focused. They worked until midnight. By the next morning, Malik was at the courthouse, filing the complaint. The clerk barely looked up as he stamped the documents. Malik didn't care. His name was now on an official court record. Williams versus Kessler Holdings. That evening, back at work, Malik walked past courtroom doors as always. But this time, with a different energy in his step. His eyes scanned the walls with intent. The courtroom wasn't just a place of injustice anymore. It was now his battleground. He passed by Judge Ellison's chambers, the same judge who'd presided over dozens of eviction cases he had quietly listened to over the past year. A stern man with a dismissive streak, especially when it came to poor tenants and pro-se litigants. Malik knew the type, knew the smirk, knew the tone of voice that would try to cut him down before he even spoke. But this time would be different. He had the law, he had the facts, he had the fire, and above all, he had nothing to lose. The courtroom was buzzing. It wasn't the kind of noise you'd hear in the streets, no shouting, no chaos. It was the low murmur of curiosity, the kind that rises when something doesn't quite fit the script. People had gathered for what should have been a routine housing case. No cameras, no headlines, just another eviction hearing in the crowded docket. Until Malik Williams stood up. Dressed in a navy blue janitor's uniform with worn-out sneakers, Malik walked past rows of shocked faces. His mop bucket had been left outside. In his hand, he carried a slim folder, filled with case law, witness statements, and notes scrawled in his own neat handwriting. His back was straight, shoulders squared, though his heart pounded against his ribs like a drum announcing war. He approached the judge's bench as if stepping into an arena. Judge Ellison squinted at the young man standing before him. His gavel hovered inches from the desk. You again, the judge said slowly, tilting his head. Didn't I see you cleaning my chambers last week? A few snickers rippled from the courtroom gallery. Even the opposing attorney, a slick man with a gold tie and an overconfident grin, chuckled quietly as he leaned into his leather chair. Yes, Your Honor, Malik replied, voice calm. I mop floors here at night. But today, I'm here to represent the defendant, Tanya Williams. My mother. Silence. Someone in the back whispered, Wait, what did he just say? The judge leaned forward, clearly amused. Son, this isn't a school debate team. You can't just stand up and pretend to be an attorney. I'm not pretending, sir, Malik said, pulling a printed form from his folder. Under Georgia Rule 9.2c, tenants may be represented in housing court by a certified pro-se advocate, provided they have submitted a waiver and documentation of preparation. The court clerk has a copy. The judge's amusement faltered for a second. He turned to the bailiff. Check the file. The courtroom held its breath. The bailiff nodded, confirming. He filed this morning, Judge. Everything's in order. A hush fell. Even the gold-tie attorney straightened in his seat. Ellison sighed, tapping his fingers against the bench. Fine, I'll allow it. But if this turns into a circus, I'll clear the gallery. Malik didn't flinch. He turned toward the gallery and spotted his mother. Tanya sat quietly in the second row, her wrinkled hands clenched tightly in her lap. Her eyes were full of worry, but also something deeper. Hope. Malik stepped to the defense table. Papers neatly organized, statements highlighted, statutes bookmarked. Opposing counsel smirked as if he still believed this would be easy. Mr. Denton, Judge Ellison addressed the landlord's attorney, you may proceed with your opening. Denton rose with the swagger of a man who believed the law was on his side. Your Honor, this is a simple case. The tenant has failed to pay rent for 3 consecutive months. Our client, Mr. Franklin, issued notices and followed all due process. We're simply asking the court to enforce the lease and authorize eviction. He sat back down with a self-satisfied grin. Malik rose slowly. He wasn't an actor. He had never spoken in public before. But he knew every word he was about to say, because he had written it with his own hands, by his mother's side, under a flickering bulb in their apartment. Your Honor, Malik began, voice low but steady. This case is not simple. It's a story of power and silence. Of a single mother caring for her ill father, working double shifts while her rent quietly increased without notice. Of broken heaters in the dead of winter, mold in the walls, and a landlord who cashed the checks, until he saw a way to make more money off tenants like her. Murmurs spread again. Judge Ellison banged his gavel once. Quiet in the court. Malik continued, gaining strength with every word. We have evidence that the building failed 5 safety inspections in the past year. We have copies of text messages, emails, and complaints, all ignored. We have neighbors ready to testify to the same treatment. He walked to the projector and placed a document under it, a letter from the housing department detailing violations. Denton sat up. Objection. This wasn't included in the pretrial disclosure. Objection noted, the judge muttered. But it's housing court, Mr. Denton, not the Supreme Court. Let the boy present. Malik smiled slightly. For the first time, he saw the courtroom not as a place of power he didn't belong to, but as a place where truth could live, if only someone dared to speak it. He called his first witness, Mrs. King, a neighbor from down the hall. She was elderly, soft-spoken, but firm. She spoke of leaking pipes, rent increases, and a landlord who ignored repairs unless a camera was present. Denton tried to rattle her with questions. Malik objected twice, both sustained. He called another witness, then another. All tenants, all stories, all voices that had never been allowed to reach this high ceiling. By the time Malik returned to his seat, even the gallery was silent. Judge Ellison leaned back, arms crossed. Well, he said, his tone less mocking now. You certainly did your homework, Mr. Williams. Malik nodded respectfully. I didn't come here to impress anyone, Your Honor. I came to make sure my mother doesn't lose her home. The judge tapped his pen thoughtfully. He glanced over at Denton, who for once had nothing smug to say, then back at Malik. You'll present closing arguments tomorrow, he said. Court adjourned for the day. The gavel fell with a sharp crack. As the room emptied, people looked at Malik differently now. No longer just a kid with a mop, but a man who dared to clean the dirt out of the system. Tanya rose and met him at the defense table. Her voice trembled. You were amazing, baby. Malik smiled. I'm just getting started, Ma. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Word had spread. A janitor was defending his mother in housing court, and he was winning. It wasn't just the regular crowd now. Law students, local activists, even a couple of reporters were in the gallery. Some had come out of curiosity. Others came to see if the system could actually be shaken by someone who didn't belong to it. Malik Williams sat at the defense table, flipping through his notes. His jaw was tight, his hands calm. This wasn't about nerves anymore. It was about justice, for his mother, for their building, and for every invisible person who'd ever been stepped on because they couldn't afford to fight back. Across from him, Attorney Denton adjusted his gold tie. He looked annoyed now. Not threatened, not afraid, just inconvenienced, like someone who realized too late that the kid janitor had turned into a legal storm. Judge Ellison entered the room, robe flowing, eyes sharp. "Court is back in session," he said, taking his seat. "Mr. Williams, you may proceed with your cross-examination of the plaintiff's witness." Malik stood. His voice was calm, clear, focused. "I call Mr. Richard Franklin to the stand." A tall, balding man in his 50s walked up slowly. This was the landlord, the man who had signed the eviction notice, ignored the repair requests, and raised the rent when nobody was looking. He took the oath, then sat. Malik walked over slowly, no rush in his step. This wasn't about intimidation. It was about truth. "Mr. Franklin," Malik began, "you've owned the Westbourne Apartments for how long?" 7 years, the man answered. "And in that time, how many times have you increased rent on the tenants?" Franklin shifted. "A few times. Standard practice. Cost of living goes up, so does rent." Malik nodded. "Right. Except in 2022, you increased rent for over half the tenants by 25% in a single month. Is that also standard?" Denton rose quickly. "Objection, argumentative." Judge Ellison waved it off. "Overruled. Answer the question." Franklin frowned. "Look, I had repairs to make. The city hounded me about violations. I needed money to fix the building." Malik turned to the gallery, then back. "Violations like exposed wiring in the hallways, mold in the stairwell, and broken heating systems?" "Yes," Franklin said stiffly. "Those repairs don't pay for themselves." "But you didn't make those repairs, did you?" Malik stepped forward. "Not until you were fined. Not until neighbors started filming the conditions and tagging the city online. Isn't that right?" Franklin didn't answer right away. "I did what I could," he muttered. Malik nodded slowly. "So, instead of fixing your building, you raised rents on families who couldn't afford it, including my mother, knowing most of them wouldn't fight back because they didn't have legal representation." Denton shot up again. "Objection, Your Honor." Ellison held up a hand. "Mr. Franklin, you may respond." Franklin glanced around, the sweat on his brow now visible. "I have over 30 tenants. I can't remember every complaint." "Good," Malik said, pulling out a document. "Let me help you remember. On October 3rd, my mother submitted a repair request for a gas leak in her kitchen. It took you 5 weeks to send someone. During that time, she had to cook with a hot plate. My grandfather, who suffers from COPD, was forced to breathe that air. Do you recall this?" Franklin blinked. I can't say I do. Would it refresh your memory if I showed you the request form and follow-up email your office ignored?" Malik placed the documents on the evidence display. The judge skimmed them silently. So did the court clerk. The audience leaned in. Malik continued, "You stated yesterday that you care about your tenants, but you didn't care enough to respond to a gas leak. You didn't care enough to clean mold. You didn't care enough to fix a broken elevator that left a disabled tenant stuck on the 3rd floor for a week." The room was dead quiet now. Franklin looked visibly rattled. Malik flipped to the next page in his binder. "And let's talk about the eviction itself. You claim my mother missed 3 rent payments, but I have bank statements showing deposits were made. She paid in full in July and August. In September, her check was returned, not because of insufficient funds, but because your office changed the payment system without notice. Isn't that correct?" Franklin didn't respond. Judge Ellison leaned forward. "Mr. Franklin? That might have happened," the landlord said quietly. "We switched to a new portal system that month. So the missed payment was due to your error," Malik pressed. Franklin sighed. "Possibly. Yes." Malik looked at the judge. No further questions. He returned to his seat, and for the first time he allowed himself to exhale. Just a little. The judge turned to Denton. "Redirect." Denton stood but hesitated. He looked at Franklin, then back at the judge. No questions, Your Honor. That was a win. A huge one. Malik had just dismantled the landlord's case in front of everyone. Calmly, respectfully, and with nothing but truth and preparation. The judge took off his glasses, rubbed his temples, and looked down at the file in front of him. "This court has heard enough," he said after a moment. "We will reconvene tomorrow for final arguments. Both sides should be prepared." The gavel cracked. Court dismissed. But Malik didn't feel dismissed. He felt seen. As people stood and filtered out, they whispered his name. Not as a janitor. Not as the kid. But as a force, the one who stood up. Tanya met him at the door, her eyes full. "I don't know where you learned all this," she whispered, hugging him tightly. Malik smiled, tired but proud. "Every night while you were sleeping, Ma. I was reading, studying, watching trials online. I knew one day we'd need someone to fight for us. So I decided it would be me." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. And as Malik looked back at the courtroom, still echoing with the power of truth, he knew one thing. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The courtroom had never been this silent. Every wooden bench was filled. The bailiff had to turn people away at the door. Even the judge's usual stern demeanor seemed to falter under the weight of what was about to happen. For the first time in decades of court proceedings, the spotlight wasn't on a seasoned lawyer or some media-hungry plaintiff. It was on a teenager, a janitor, who had somehow turned a hopeless eviction case into the city's most talked-about trial. Malik Williams stood at the defense table, eyes steady, suit borrowed, but spirit unshakable. Beside him, his mother, Tanya, clutched a tissue in one hand and a prayer in the other. It had taken everything in her to stay seated these past few days while her son stood alone against a team of attorneys, cross-examining a landlord who thought of tenants as numbers and missed rent as excuses. But now, it all came down to this. Judge Ellison looked over the files in front of him. His fingers tapped the bench slowly, thoughtfully. "Before I render my decision," he said, his voice filling the courtroom like a drumbeat, "I want to acknowledge what this case has become." He removed his glasses and set them down gently. This began as a standard eviction hearing, one of thousands the city sees every year. But over the last 4 days, it has transformed into something else, something far more important. He turned to Malik. "Mr. Williams, though you are not a licensed attorney, you have represented your mother with clarity, dignity, and a knowledge of civil procedure that rivals many practicing lawyers. Your questions were sharp. Your evidence was thorough. And more importantly, your argument was compelling, not just legally, but morally." A quiet gasp moved through the gallery. Malik's heart pounded. Judge Ellison opened the final folder in front of him. "Based on the testimony, the submitted evidence, and the contradictions in the plaintiff's statements, especially regarding payment systems and unaddressed repairs, I find that the eviction notice issued to Ms. Tanya Williams was improperly served, and that her payment was obstructed by the landlord's negligence." Malik's eyes widened. Furthermore, the judge continued, "The plaintiff's failure to maintain livable conditions, including dangerous gas leaks and unresolved mold complaints, constitutes a violation of the city's tenant protection laws." He turned to Richard Franklin, the landlord. "Mr. Franklin, you will immediately withdraw the eviction notice. Additionally, you are ordered to conduct full repairs on the affected units, including Ms. Williams, within 30 days. Failure to do so will result in fines and possible civil action from other tenants." Gasps turned to applause. Tanya put her hands to her mouth. Malik's shoulders finally relaxed. But the judge wasn't done. He leaned forward. "And as for you, Mr. Williams," Malik straightened. Every eye turned toward him. "You have reminded this court of something we often forget, that justice does not require credentials. It requires courage. You saw injustice, and rather than accept it, you rose. I commend you." Then came the sound Malik would never forget. The gavel. Sharp, final, powerful. Case dismissed. The room erupted. Reporters jumped to their feet. A student in the back yelled, "That's right, Malik." Several community members clapped until the bailiff had to calm them down. Tanya threw her arms around her son. Her tears soaked his shoulder, but she didn't care. This wasn't just about keeping their apartment. It was about what her son had become. A fighter. No, a defender. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. Malik couldn't speak. His throat was tight with emotion. As they walked out of the courtroom, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Strangers shook his hand. Mothers hugged him. A local activist offered him a business card. Even Attorney Denton, stiff and humbled, approached him. "You're something special, kid," he admitted. "If you ever decide to go to law school, I'd be lucky to hire you." Malik gave a small, polite smile, but inside his thoughts were swirling. Outside the courthouse. Outside the courthouse, news cameras waited. A local journalist shoved a mic forward. "Malik, Channel 6 News. How did it feel representing your mom in court?" He looked at the camera, then down at his mother's hand holding his. "Honestly," he said, "it felt like everything I've ever studied in silence finally meant something." "What do you mean?" the reporter asked. Malik looked out at the crowd gathering around. "I've been working night shifts for years. I cleaned the same courtroom floors I just stood in. I used to empty trash while people with degrees and suits talked about justice like it belonged to them. But it doesn't. It belongs to us too." He took a breath. "I didn't have money. I didn't have power. I just had truth and the will to speak it. That's what made the difference." Another reporter yelled, "Do you want to be a lawyer one day?" Malik paused. A slow, knowing smile crossed his face. "I think I already am." That evening. Later that evening, in the quiet of their apartment, the same apartment they had almost lost, Malik sat at the small kitchen table. His laptop was open. A half-finished cup of tea sat beside him. He was going through emails. There were over 500. Some were from people in similar situations, begging for help. Others were from community organizers offering scholarships, mentorships, even legal internships. One was from a woman named Gloria Parks, a retired judge, offering to mentor him personally. And then one email caught his eye. Subject: From sweeping floors to supreme scores. From Mirror Lab Legal Fellowship Program. Message: Malik, we saw your case. We watched your cross-examination. We believe you are a future legal force. If you're interested, we'd like to offer you a full scholarship to our youth legal incubator. No strings attached, just talent, heart, and commitment to justice. Let us know. The Mirror Lab team. Malik leaned back in his chair. He thought of every night he'd walked those empty court halls with a mop and earbuds, listening to lectures on YouTube. Every textbook he had borrowed, every note he had written, every quiet moment no one saw. They saw him now, and for the first time in a long time, so did he. The morning after the verdict, Malik awoke to sunlight on his face and a silence that felt foreign. Not the anxious silence of eviction notices and overdue bills, but a rare, peaceful kind. For the first time in months, he didn't have to rush off to work before dawn or pull another night shift scrubbing courthouse floors. He was still processing it all. Just yesterday, he had stood where lawyers usually stood, challenged a system that wasn't built for kids like him, and won. The weight of it hadn't truly sunk in until now. He opened his email again. The subject line from Mirror Lab still blinked at him like a glowing invitation. From sweeping floors to supreme scores. He read it twice more just to be sure it was real. A full scholarship to a youth legal incubator. They saw something in him. Something more than just a janitor with a sharp tongue and borrowed suit. Tanya walked into the kitchen, still in her robe, a coffee cup in hand. Her eyes were soft, proud and a little teary. "You didn't sleep much, huh?" she asked, rubbing his shoulder. Malik nodded. "Too many thoughts. Too many dreams, maybe." She smiled and kissed the top of his head. "Well, baby, maybe it's time you stop dreaming and start doing." Before he could respond, his phone rang. Unknown number. Malik hesitated, then answered. "Hello." A calm, steady voice replied. "Mr. Williams, this is Judge Gloria Parks. I saw your performance in court yesterday. Very impressive." Malik blinked. You watched the case?" "Watched it. Analyzed it. And clapped at my TV when you exposed that landlord's lies, she said with a chuckle. Judge Gloria Parks was a legend, one of the first black women to serve on the state's appellate court before her retirement. To Malik, she was someone he'd only read about in articles and history lessons. "I'm honored, ma'am," he stammered. "Good," she said, "because I don't just call to hand out compliments. I mentor youth who show promise in the law, not just academics but spirit, too. You have both." Malik sat up straighter. "There's a program I run in partnership with Miralab. We call it the Bench Project. I take on one student each year. It's intense. No fluff. Just real training, real exposure, and yes, some real-life courtroom time. If you're serious, you're my pick this year." He was speechless. "Think about it," she said. "But not too long. Real change waits for no one." Before Malik could find the right words, the line clicked off. Later that week, at the city courthouse, Malik walked in for the first time since the verdict, but this time not in a janitor's uniform. He wore a crisp shirt, slacks, and the same worn leather shoes he'd argued in. Waiting by the security checkpoint was a tall woman in a navy blue pantsuit. Gray curls framed her wise, commanding face. "Judge Parks?" he asked. She turned, smiled. "Malik, you clean up well." "Thank you, ma'am." "You ready to stop being the story and start learning how to write them?" He nodded. She handed him a slim blue folder. "Your first assignment, observation. I want you to sit in courtroom 3A this week. Listen. Not to the judge, not even to the lawyers. Listen to the people. The ones who don't know how to speak the law but are drowning in it." Malik opened the folder. Inside was a docket, child custody hearings, housing disputes, small claims arguments. "They're not glamorous cases," she said, "but they're the front lines of justice." Courtroom 3A. Over the next few days, Malik sat quietly in the back row of courtroom 3A, his notebook filled with scribbles and questions. He watched a single mother beg to keep her daughter after a false neglect claim. He saw a landlord evict an elderly man over a single missed payment. He saw broken English, broken systems, and broken people all in one place. And in each case, he saw how easily the outcome could change, if someone just listened. On Thursday, Judge Parks met him outside after court. "Well?" she asked. "These people aren't stupid," Malik said. "They're just not fluent in law." She grinned. "Exactly. And that's where we come in." She led him to a small office down the hall. Inside were 2 desks, a whiteboard, and stacks of case files. "This is yours now," she said. "We're starting your legal training here. Not in a classroom. In the trenches. A shift in purpose." Over the next month, Malik's life transformed. He split his time between working at a local youth center, studying legal frameworks under Judge Parks, and occasionally assisting in community legal aid clinics. He wasn't just learning theory, he was helping real people file motions, translate lease terms, and understand their rights. Word of his work spread. Local news ran a follow-up story titled, "From Janitor to Justice Advocate: The Rise of Malik Williams." Schools invited him to speak. Parents asked him to help their kids stay out of trouble. Even an attorney at Denton's firm offered to mentor him part-time. But Malik kept his focus. "I'm not trying to be famous," he told Parks. "I just want to make the system less scary for folks like us." "And Judge Parks?" She smiled each time he said something like that, because she knew this kid wasn't just going to change his life. He was going to change the whole game. One night, one thought. Late one evening, Malik sat on the rooftop of his building, looking at the city skyline. Tanya brought him a blanket and sat beside him. "Never thought I'd see the day my baby boy would be helping others fight the law," she whispered. Malik smiled, looking out at the lights. "I used to clean these buildings, wondering who sat behind all those glass windows. Now I know." He turned to her. "Someday, I'm going to build one of those places. Not just for lawyers, but for kids with big hearts and big voices who've been told to stay quiet." Tanya grinned through misty eyes. "You already started, baby." The courtroom was quiet now, just a ghost of the place it had been when Malik made headlines. But tonight, he wasn't here to fight or argue. He was waiting. Across from him, Judge Parks sipped tea from a steel thermos as city lights spilled through the stained glass window behind her. "You nervous?" she asked without looking up. "A little," Malik said honestly. "You should be. This offer isn't just a step forward. It's a leap." He looked down at the crisp letter in his hand. Gold embossed, official, and heavy with opportunity. Denton and Keller LLP, the same high-powered firm that once stood against his mother, had extended him an internship, paid, prestigious, and fast-tracked toward law school. "You think it's a trap?" he asked. Parks chuckled. "Not a trap, but it's a test. This world loves brilliant minds, especially when it can shape them early." He folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. "I didn't think they'd even remember me." "Oh, they remember," she said, finally looking at him. "You embarrassed one of their top lawyers on public record. That kind of performance doesn't go unnoticed." "But why me?" he asked. "Why not some kid from Yale or a prep school?" "Because you're not just smart, Malik. You're raw, real. And the legal world is starving for authenticity. They want that shine on their roster, and they'll pay to polish it their way." Monday morning, the firm. The Denton and Keller building towered over downtown like a monument to power. Gold-tinted glass, revolving doors, marble floors that echoed like a cathedral. Malik stepped inside wearing his best shirt and tie, his mother's necklace tucked beneath his collar. A young assistant greeted him. "Mr. Williams, we're so glad to have you here." She led him up to the 22nd floor, all glass walls and quiet wealth. In the center sat Eleanor Denton, sharp-suited, silver-haired, with eyes like a hawk. She extended her hand. "Malik, welcome. Let's talk." The temptation. The offer was more than generous. A 4-month paid internship. One-on-one mentorship under a partner. Connections to the top law schools. And, the kicker, a personal scholarship fund all in his name. "I won't lie to you," Denton said. "We're not offering this because it's charity. We're offering it because you're good, and because people are watching you. You're the future, and we want to be part of that." Malik looked around the room. High-end artwork, framed headlines, Harvard degrees. He could see his future here, a corner office, prestige, a voice in rooms that made the rules. But he also saw something else. Silence. Coldness. A kind of moral sterility. "You defended my landlord," Malik said suddenly. "Tried to have my mom evicted." Denton didn't blink. "We represent clients, not causes. It's our job to argue the best case, not judge it. But you'll have the power to decide what you stand for." She leaned forward. "So, Malik, what do you stand for?" Back at the community center. That night, Malik returned to the youth legal aid clinic, a tiny space with peeling paint and buzzing fluorescent lights. On the floor were milk crates full of eviction notices, custody forms, and complaints scribbled in broken English. "Hey!" a young boy shouted as he saw Malik enter. "The lawyer's back." He smiled. "Still not a lawyer yet, kid. But you talk like one," the boy said. "And people listen." Inside, Tanya was helping an older woman fill out a housing form. Across the room, volunteers handed out food packets. This wasn't shiny. It wasn't powerful. But it was real. A girl named Aisha pulled Malik aside. "You said you'd look over my school suspension appeal?" He nodded. "Yeah, let's do it." Torn between two worlds. For days, Malik wrestled with the offer. Judge Parks noticed. "Look," she said during one of their sessions. "I won't tell you to say no. That offer can open doors. But don't forget, some doors don't lead home. They just lead deeper into the maze." "What if I want both?" he asked. "Change from the inside, and still stay connected to the people?" "Then do it," she said. "But make damn sure you're the one changing the system, not the system changing you." A decision. On Friday morning, Malik stood again before the Denton and Keller Tower, letter in hand. He walked through the revolving doors, was ushered up without delay. Eleanor Denton greeted him with her usual poise. "Well," Malik took a breath. "I appreciate the offer, truly. But I can't accept it. Not like this." Her brow arched. "Meaning?" I don't want to be your poster boy. I want to build a career that reflects my values, not bury them under partnerships and prestige. So if I join your firm, I bring my community with me. I bring my advocacy. I bring my story. Denton folded her hands, measuring him. You know that could be complicated? I know. But I also know you want me for a reason. I won't fake who I am to fit in your world. If I walk through your door, it's as Malik Williams, son of Tanya, janitor's son, justice seeker, and future attorney. There was a long pause. Then slowly Denton smiled. Good. You passed the second test. He blinked. Second. First was your performance in court. Second was this choice. Welcome aboard, Mr. Williams. Later that night, at home, Malik sat beside Tanya on their small couch, the city glowing behind them. You sure you did the right thing? She asked. He nodded. I didn't sell out. I bought in on my own terms. She smiled and pulled him into a hug. You've always been brilliant. Now the world knows it too. The courtroom was packed again. Only this time, Malik wasn't standing in a janitor's uniform. He wasn't sweeping floors or blending into the background. He was at the center of it all, dressed in a crisp navy suit, legal binder in hand, eyes steady. The youngest speaker ever invited to represent youth legal advocacy at the State Justice Summit. News cameras lined the back wall. Judges, attorneys, law students, and activists filled the benches. And in the front row, Tanya Williams, her hands clasped tightly over her heart, watched her son rise. Malik stepped up to the podium. He didn't look down at notes. He didn't clear his throat. He spoke like he was speaking to the system itself. I was never supposed to stand here. 3 years ago, I was invisible to this system. Not because I wasn't smart or willing or passionate, but because I was poor, black, and the son of a janitor. I used to sweep courtroom floors, not sit in them. I used to empty trash cans in the very rooms where justice was supposed to be served. But what I saw wasn't justice. I saw tired eyes. I saw rushed verdicts. I saw lawyers who knew your case before you opened your mouth, because they'd already decided who you were. The room was silent. Still, Malik's voice grew stronger. But the day my mom was evicted, something shifted. I had no choice but to speak up, not because I was ready, but because silence would have meant watching everything we had get taken again. That day, I realized that knowledge isn't reserved for the privileged. Power isn't reserved for the wealthy. And courage? Courage is born when you're pushed to the edge and choose to fight instead of fall. Faces in the crowd. Judge Parks sat in the upper balcony, arms folded, a faint smile on her face. Beside her, students from Malik's legal clinic sat wide-eyed, recording on their phones. In another row, Eleanor Denton, the same high-powered attorney who once tried to evict Malik's family, now nodded with genuine respect. He was their intern now, and their most promising future associate. But Malik didn't speak for any of them. He spoke for the people still outside these rooms. The system is built like a locked door. Let's be honest. This legal system wasn't built for kids like me. It was built like a locked door. But here's what I've learned. You don't have to wait for the key. You can build your own. The law isn't magic. It's language. It's structure. And once you learn it, truly learn it, you can bend it, challenge it, and reshape it to protect people instead of punish them. Standing ovation. As Malik wrapped his speech, he closed his binder gently and stepped back from the mic. For a second, just a breath, the room remained still. Then a single clap echoed. Then another. And another. Within moments, the entire courtroom was on its feet. A full standing ovation. Not out of charity. Not out of surprise, but out of recognition. They saw a future in Malik. A leader, a lawyer, a legacy in motion. After the speech, in the courthouse hallway, Malik was flooded with handshakes and interviews. Law professors handed him cards. Community leaders asked him to speak at their schools. News reporters hovered with microphones. But the only person Malik wanted to find was standing quietly by the door. His mother. She didn't say anything. She just wrapped her arms around him, tight and trembling. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. Your voice reached places I never thought we'd touch. The final case. Weeks later, Malik took on a real case, his first as part of Denton and Keller's pro bono division. It was small on paper. A young boy named Jalen was being expelled for a fight he didn't start. No lawyers, no due process, just a form and a signature. Malik visited Jalen's school personally. He sat in the metal chair across from the principal and looked her dead in the eye. "What we're not going to do," Malik said calmly, "is throw another young black boy out of the classroom without hearing his side." He presented video evidence, witness testimony, a written appeal. Within a day, Jalen's record was cleared, teaching the next generation. Inspired by his case, Malik began hosting weekly legal literacy classes at the community center, the same center where he once fixed leaky faucets. Kids packed the room, sitting on floors and benches, hanging on every word. "They're going to try to tell you the law is too complicated," he said one night. "It's not. It's just been hidden in fine print and big words. But once you understand it, no one can lie to you. No one can take what's yours." Malik Williams Foundation. Months later, a plaque was mounted outside the Community Legal Aid Office, the Malik Williams Justice Initiative, built to serve the voices too long ignored. The foundation, funded in part by Denton and Keller, gave scholarships to marginalized students who wanted to study law, journalism, or public policy. Malik didn't just open the door, he left it wide open for others. Full circle. One cold evening, Malik returned to the old courthouse where it all began. Same floor, same courtroom, same janitor's closet. He peeked inside, still full of mops, buckets, and that same smell of dust and bleach. He stepped in, just for a moment, and smiled. "Thank you," he whispered, not to the closet, but to the version of himself who never stopped believing, even when the world refused to look. In a world that tried to define him by the broom in his hand, Malik Williams rewrote the story. One law, one case, one life at a time. From janitor to justice, he didn't just break the mold. He became the blueprint.